Hello, today we're going to talk about and demonstrate the vPro features that are part of the Dell Client Command Suite. So, what is the Dell Client Command Suite? DCCS for short. Simply put, it's a collection of free tools that Dell provides to enhance the management for its client systems. DCCS has several components, as you can see below. Today, we're going to focus on out-of-band management with vPro. What do I mean when I say out-of-band management? Let me set that up with an example for you. Let's say that you have an issue with a device and it's not reachable by your traditional in-band management services like group policy or case or SCCM. Maybe the device is blue screened and crashed, or maybe it's even powered off. That's where out-of-band management comes in. Think of it as a secondary channel of communication to access and control the assets in your environment. So with that, let me flip over to my lab and we'll take a look at some of how all of this works. Okay, the first thing you'll see is this is the Dell Command out-of-band management utility that I have running here. So you'll see there's two options for provisioning. The first is remote provisioning and USB provisioning. With remote provisioning, this tool gets installed as part of the integration suite for System Center. It's wizard-based and it walks you through all of the settings that you'll need to get it set up. The first is getting a license file. So you'd fill out this form and email it into Dell. There is no cost for getting that license. The next step of that would be setting up a certificate for you to use with your vPro system. Lastly, once you get your certificate, you can go through the configuration wizard and set up all the options you want, your passwords for your domain accounts, your certificate server, set up where the Intel SCS remote configuration service files are available because it will install that service. Give it the certificate that you've gotten and the passwords for your AMT profile. So once you get all this filled out, you hit save and apply, and it will go through and configure your machine for remote provisioning. We also have a USB provisioning mode if you don't have SCCM available to you or you don't want to modify your server. You can stick a USB key in the machine, fill out a couple small pieces of information here, where your USB key is, what password you want to use, how you want to format it, import your certificate file and hit create key, and it will create a bootable USB key that you can power on a machine with, and it will automatically configure the vPro on that machine for your environment. So let's look at a little bit more at the remote provisioning and what that does. On your SCCM server, what it does is it adds three collections: vPro capable, vPro provisioned, and vPro not compliant. It also adds, it also adds a couple of task sequences here to roll out vPro. So let's take a look at those. We have configure client, we have discover client, and we have unconfigure client. So for discover client, I would tag that to all systems and let that roll out and figure out which machines have vPro. Once that runs, they will show up in this vPro capable collection right here. Then I'm going to tie the configure client on a deployment to that vPro capable collection. So as machines report in as being vPro capable, we're going to go ahead and configure those to run in our environment. So that's really the crux of it. It's pretty simple. So let's now take a look. Once we provisioned a couple clients, let's take a look at some of the functionality that we have. So the first thing I want to look at is in the client configuration, we have an ability to set boot order. So let's say, for instance, you've just rolled out a bunch of machines and you realized after the fact that your BIOS script failed to configure the boot devices correctly. So we could come in here and do that. Let's say you want to add or remove options, probably remove. So let's say that you only want to boot from the internal hard drive, for instance. We can deselect everything. We have the option here of rebooting as soon as this is applied, or we can just let the machine reboot under its natural circumstances, which is the way that I would have it set. So once we select what we want, we can select our clients. My lab, I only have one client that's vPro capable, and that's it right there. So what you can do in this screen though, let's say you have hundreds or thousands of clients in here, we can go in and we can select how we want to look at a machine, either by host names or domains, or let's say by model. We want a model to contain, let's say we only want to go to 7400s. We can search and you see I don't have any of those right now, which is why that disappeared. So my model that I have, it happens to be a 7470. When I select that, here it is. You could also incidentally go by latitude. Helps if you spell it right. Or anything. So you go ahead and throw that over into the items that you want this to run on. The next step would be to schedule the task to run whenever you want that to run, probably right now, and hit next. And you'd go ahead and set that in motion. So we also have the ability to set BIOS settings in here. You see we have a whole myriad of BIOS settings in here that we can set. And I could see this being particularly useful if you're on the phone with somebody and you're helping them troubleshoot and you realize that there's a BIOS setting that you need to change. You can go ahead and set that here, select the clients the same way that you did the last time, and go ahead and run that right away, have the user reboot. Particularly useful if you have a user that you wouldn't feel comfortable making BIOS changes, or even if you have a BIOS password set where you don't want or wouldn't be able to have a user make those BIOS changes, you could do that here. You could theoretically make a whole bunch of changes here, select a whole bunch of clients, and go ahead and modify lots of BIOSes doing that. That's certainly available. However, I wouldn't recommend doing it from this tool. DCCS comes with a tool specifically purpose-built for BIOS settings called to configure. That's what I would use if you had a lot of BIOS settings to change. So you can also do passwords, BIOS passwords this is. So you can clear the password, both the administrator password or the system password. You could clear set or set complexity requirements, or at least the length that you want it. What we're going to get into now is really kind of the meat of the out-of-band management, is how you're really going to manage these machines. So we're going to go with KVM Connect, and we're going to select the client that I have here. You'll see I have the option of getting user consent rather before connecting to a machine. There's use cases both ways. Maybe you're dealing with a very sensitive area of the company, HR, finance, or something, where you would want the user to acknowledge that you're remoting in. They would see a 6-digit PIN on their screen when you hit connect. They would read it off to you over the phone. You'd put that in, and that's how you'd connect to their machine. There's also cases where you wouldn't necessarily want or need consent. Let's say you have a machine that's sitting in the corner and it's running a batch task job or something, and it's managed to power itself off. You need to connect to it and start it back up. In that case, there wouldn't be anyone there to give consent, so you can turn that off both ways. So let's go ahead and connect to my test machine here. See, I'm firing it up here. And there we go. There is my test machine. Let me go ahead and log in. Okay, so as it's logging in here, we're logging into Windows, and you'll see from here it acts and behaves just like you'd expect any remote desktop tool to behave. You can run programs, you can do whatever you need to do here. I'm getting a little bit of video lag here today, but you get the idea. So remote desktop really isn't, the power in this tool. The power in this tool is what else you could do that's beyond remote desktop. So let's take a look at those out of band features. So right off the bat, you can look and say, okay, I have these power control features. So I can power it on or power it off. That's from completely off, by the way. I can reboot the OS. I can reboot to diagnostics. Let's say maybe I suspect there's a problem with a memory module or something. I can reboot it to diagnostics. That'll come up and have the diagnostics run, and I can see what the results are of that. I could reboot to BIOS. This is another way that I could make a particular BIOS change if I wanted to while I was troubleshooting on the phone with somebody. Or this is a neat feature too. Let's say the machine is totally crashed and you need to reload the OS on it. I can reboot with IDER, which is remote, is what the R stands for. And what that does is it would allow me to go ahead and select, let's say I decide I need to reload Windows 10 from scratch. I can pick my Windows 10 ISO, throw it in here, hit connect and reboot, and I could actually go ahead and through a boot cycle, keep that DVD mounted and install the OS from scratch and follow all the prompts through just like I was sitting in front of the machine. Very powerful tool there. So in this case, let's just go ahead and reboot to BIOS and take a look and see what that looks like. So as we're shutting down here, you see this is powered by real VNC. If you get an actual license, that screen obviously wouldn't be there. So the machine is just rebooting. It's coming back now. You see the Dell logo and you'll see it's preparing to enter setup. And there we are. We are in the BIOS. We could go ahead and make whatever changes we need to make here for our troubleshooting. So in this case, I don't have anything to change, so I'm not going to. I'm going to go ahead and exit. And when I exit, what I'm going to do is I also have the ability to hit F12 here to bring up a boot menu as it's booting. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, it's restarting now. Banging away on the F12 key. And there we go. So I've hit the F12 key to bring up the boot menu. And this is particularly powerful. Let's say that I want to Pixie boot it and re-image it from my SCCM server. I have that ability here where I could Pixie boot it and watch it all the way through the process of the SCCM server configuring it. As we saw, we could go into the BIOS and set up settings there. We could do a BIOS flash remotely from this. In this case, I'm not going to do any of those things. I'm just going to boot back into Windows. But all of those options are available, and that's really where the power of the out-of-band management comes from. So let's boot back into Windows. And as that's doing that, I'm going to show you a couple other features here. So we have this power management feature. So this is kind of useful. Let me set up a scenario for you where let's say you're managing a call center and your call center hours are 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. You could come in here and set a job, a power on job, let's say. We could select our clients. Again, we could go ahead and select by, let's say that all of our call center names start with call center. I don't know. We could pick everything in the call center here. We could highlight it over here. We could set a scheduled task for them to all start at, let's say 7:30 in the morning. So all of your agents show up in the morning at 8 o'clock. Their machines are all booted up and they're ready for them to log in and get to work. You could do the same thing. You could shut them all down at 9 p.m., let's say. Save yourself some power. Very powerful features with that. So we do have some limited reporting here. And the task queue, which what this shows you is any of those jobs that you've set up through here will show up down here and you can see the status of them. Where they are in the rollout, where they are, how successful they were. So in a nutshell, that is the vPro out-of-band management with Dell Client Command Suite. Let me disconnect here. And let me flip back. And wrap it all up here. So in summary, we saw how you could provision devices in your environment. We modified some BIOS settings remotely. We used the KZM feature to remote into a device. We also saw how you could use it to power on a device, Pixie boot a device, configure the BIOS, or even install a new iOS or a new OS rather from an ISO file from scratch. And given that, we really just scratched the surface on it. There's plenty of other functionality as part of DCCS. If you want more information, please reach out to your account team or go to dell.com/command to check it out. Thank you.